Welcome, Matty Lim. Thank you for
Hello,
joining
guy.
me. How are
World
you?
famous. Oh, I'm doing great, guy. I'm here with world famous Guy Anderson. It's my completely my honor. I'm happy to be here.
Infamous, I think is more likely.
well, yeah, they can go. That's on both sides here.
Well, this is the first interview for Across the Pond, and I've been on their channel before, and they want to now get more content out there about Tartaria. And for me, you're my go-to guy when it comes to science fiction and Tartaria,
Oh yes, all
because you
right,
know
good.
so much about it. And I thought it would be a really great way to start this series that we're doing for Across the Pond with getting you on, because I know that you live, eat, breathe, and shit Richard Shaver. So I thought, well,
We're gonna
I've
get
done.
kicked off this podcast immediately.
I sort of have delved a little bit into Shaver, but for me, H.G. Wells and Jules Verne is where I've seen lots of older information that perhaps is soft disclosure. But more recently, I think the first Back to the Future film is telling us an awful lot
Back to the
about the
Future film,
ether
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah. Well, Guy, on that subject, you'll notice that, like in the back, I started watching older movies because, first of all the old movies are just are better. They're made better and they're more fun. It's a bit nostalgic to go back and watch them. But if you even go all the way back to like the westerns and stuff, they they love to show the old world in the background, like on every movie, even if it's like, guys, even if it's like, what's the, oh gosh, I wasn't planning on talking about this. I was just thinking in the background of, what's that? Even spy movies and stuff. They'll just frame like an old Tartarian building, like in the background and stuff.
yeah,
Always, like they always do it. Um, McKenna's Gold is like an old, really really old one. That's a western, and they'll show in the background. They're showing like all this like mud flood and like melt meltology, like the just the old like buildings. They're not buildings, I mean they're mountains and stuff, but we know better. Or at least we suspect that there's something different. I mean they're glorious, especially stuff out west here in America, like the tabletop sort of mountains, and like
mm,
out in Utah, and everything's red and you just wonder if it's like melted brick or what's going
yeah,
on there. But so I always suspected this. I started like going, hey, Guy, look at all these movies. They're always showing all these interesting buildings or mountains or some strange, because they know what's going on, but they don't ever mention it like, consciously. They like to put it in the subconscious, or they like to frame that. I'm sure they know about it. And so I got in touch with a guy, James Mazio, and he actually worked for Hollywood. He was a sound guy,
wow,
and he was like, oh, and he went on Terry Carter. So I don't know if you know who Terry Carter is, but Terry Carter is a guy. He's like a gold. What are they? He's a prospector,
yeah,
and he has a channel on YouTube, and he's got all these old prospectors that tell incredible tales. And you would think Tartaria wouldn't be in that, but it 100% is. Tartaria, Lemuria, Mu, Atlantis. It's all like in these stories of these old prospectors, out looking for gold, but spending a lot of time in the American West, And so James Mazio was on there, and he was a sound guy for movies, and he 100% goes, we get we're allowed to go film because we're a film company,
yeah,
and they always pick these spots. Exactly what I was suspecting. And he goes, well, not only that, we get to go out to like even military bases and film. And how did he get the pass for that? And he started saying, what's underneath the military base are these underground cities. And he goes, I found the entrances to them. And he starts showing us, some videos and some pictures that he's taken personally of stuff, of entrances into the underground, and it's fascinating. He goes, look at this one. This is, he goes, I can't get any closer because they've fenced it all off, and it's clearly a big cave entrance, and there's like electrical going on the side of it, and it's all very old. He goes, these didn't used to always be fenced off and closed, and you could kind of sneak down in there, but now they've gone and fenced it off in like the last 10 or 20 years or whatever. And I mean, it's just one more notch, you know, confirming like all the things that we think about, you know. But yeah, if you go and check out old movies, you'll just see that in the backgrounds they're always framing, you know, an old Tartarian building, or you know, something very interesting is happening in the background always, you know, because they always, nothing happens in a movie without them sort of framing everything. That's what they do. Nothing happens by accident, right? You know.
No, I totally agree, and I think that if you look at Ghostbusters, the first movie, the sort of pivotal moments of that all happen in this what we would call a Tartarian building, and then you know, Back to the Future, as I mentioned earlier on. You know, it's all around the clock tower. The building looks out of place. It's older than the rest of the town. You know, So I wonder, you know, is this soft disclosure? Are they following this sort of karmic retribution, where if they tell us what they're doing, even if it's through the work of fiction, does that cover their asses? So if, you know, when the time comes, they meet their maker and they're asked, you know, did you lie? Did you deceive people? They can say, well, no, we told them everything, but we did it in a different way. We weren't upfront. They were kind of sneaky about it. But sometimes I wonder if they're doing it just to play games with us. Are they sort of teasing us a little bit?
I think so. I think it's a lot of everything. What do they call it when you know something and you're lying and then you're laughing? I forget what the name of that is. They're like tells, you know, and and I think that they do know a lot of things, and maybe they are mocking us to some degree. And of course, the karmic retribution thing, like you were talking about, it's part of their religion, right? You know, but also too, I think deep down inside, I would say most of them are desperately wanting to kind of talk about this sort of stuff. So because they can't, they can kind of work within the parameters. They can show stuff. They can even write books about it as fiction, like what we're going to talk about today. So they have like a little bit of wiggle room. But the other thing is it's hard for them to deviate from the things that they know, even though the things that they know are like incredibly fantastic things, like, you know, that we don't know, the hidden world, because that's what Richard Shaver calls it, the hidden world. And they just basically keep retelling these old stories of what they know of the hidden world, and we eat it up because we, as the general population, the Muggles, we can smell that truth that's in there, and we just want more of it, because when you're starved of truth and then you get some, you want more of it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like your books and stuff.
So what? Thanks for the plug.
Outside agency.
So what got you into Richard Shaver? I mean, how old were you when you started? When you discovered him.
That's a trippy story. You ever something happens to you in your life, and then years later you're like, that was supposed to happen. We were just out visiting. We went, and I think they were in the movie industry. My parents knew, because we live north of Hollywood here, not terribly close, but about 45 minutes away or whatever. And so we always know people in the business, sort of thing, and that happens. Anyway, so we went to their house one day, just randomly, and I was so like, this kid had like his whole room was like totally set up, had all this toy. It was like very, very well organized, this beautiful house. But on this wall was a poster, and it was, I wonder if it's, see if I can find it. And it was a poster of Richard Shaver. It was like it was like, something like this. Let's see. Yeah, it wasn't this one. Whoops.
Yeah.
but it was just that sort of style of artwork, coming from like Adventure magazine and a lot of the 1940s magazines that, they were like science fiction magazines. And anyway, this was the cover of one, and it was Richard Shaver, and it was actually, I guess I don't have it here. I'll have to look it up. It was actually it was a machine, a boring machine, kind of real 1950s, 40s style looking. It's kind of hokey looking, but it was very fascinating. It was breaking through the surface. Very famous Richard Shaver drawing, I guess. I don't know who's doing their drawings, and it was breaking through. It had like a drill bit on the end of it, like a big auger bit, and it was breaking through. You might even have seen it. And then there was actually like a dome where the guy was sitting in it, and then they were shooting ray guns, and all this is going on in this poster. And I looked at it, and something clicked. And so I was like 8 years old. Something really clicked inside me. And then like years and years and years later, I was listening to like David Wilcock. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Yeah.
David Wilcock and Corey Good, right? And was listening to them, and I guess it was like it was like a commercial that they, YouTube will put commercials on stuff.
Yeah.
And this was in a commercial. I don't even think it was attributed to David Wilcock for whatever reason, but it was there. So I was like, you know what, I've never, that's Richard Shaver. I didn't realize who that was. I want to go and read a book by that. I want to go and see. And that ended up in me reading, like, for about 2 years, just buried my head in like all the Richard Shaver stories. Look at them all. Look, I've got volumes of them. And I highly recommend it. Like, you can go to like, I have no affiliation with this, but you can go to Amazon, buy them for like $8. And there's 8 of them. And I don't know if they've edited or done anything, so that's something else I'll probably have to look into in the future. But they condensed them all down into these volumes, and then so everything he's ever written is in there, and it's just fascinating. So, but once I started reading it, I couldn't put them down, and I read and reread them. Like, I don't say this is not, but they're like the Bible to me.
Yeah,
because the stories that he writes about, no one man could have made up all that stuff. Especially, he says he was a welder, and I'll tell you how he started. So he was a welder, and he was welding, and something happened where when he was working on this building, some sort of connection was made, and he started hearing voices through his welding equipment, and basically like electromagnetic resonance.
Right.
And so that's how the whole thing took off, because he started realizing these voices were talking about him, and then he started mentioning it to his fellow workmates, like, hey, were you just talking to me? And they all thought he was crazy, and so he kept it to himself, but it kept on going on until he realized that they were talking about him. And
this is in a particular building he was working in. It only happened there, or did it happen from then on?
That's unclear. What? So something happened, and he got thrown in jail, and then from the jail he ended up going into a mental institution. This is not going to be very good for poor Richard Shavers, but he's in there. I mean, that's kind of a common story, and it was in the jail that's when he ends up meeting this woman. This girl kept coming to him in a dream while he was in jail. He was only in jail for like 6 months or something. I forgot what it was for, and it wasn't for anything serious. It was like literally a parking ticket or something. I forget what it was. But so he's in there, and he kept having the same dream about this Lydia, and I can remember her name is Lydia, and she was a blind girl. And then he started lucid dreaming about her, so like he could literally like talk to her in the dream. And then according to the story, she came and got him out of the jail, and I think that's why they sent him into the mental institution, because he got sprung out of the jail. So it went from like this ethereal thing that was just sort of happening to him and into like a physical reality. And she came and was able to open up the cell door. The guards were asleep, and they just walked out at like 3 a.m. or something.
Wow.
And so he went missing. And so when they finally caught up to him, they like I don't know when they caught up to him, and then they put him into mental institution because I think he was trying to tell him about what had happened to him.
Yeah.
And so to finish out his sentence, I guess they stuck him in a mental institution. Now, who knows what happened to him there? You know, what's going on in there, because the mental institutions are old Tartarian buildings.
They
usually,
are.
or
They
on the
are.
ley line or something.
And if he's been having these sort of interactions, then I wonder if the building he was working on when it first took place was on an
That
energy
makes me
grid.
wonder too. I actually had a thought about that yesterday because I was watching the U.S. Open here. The U.S. Open of golf is happening in America
Yeah.
right now. It's by Pittsburgh, and so they were showing. It's called it's God, my brain can't work this early. It's called something where it was it's like a fiery furnace, and that's where they were making Pittsburgh steel. And then the official story is that they made, you know, it's like the Rockefellers and a couple other big names, you know, all the industrial titans, right? And
Yeah.
who knows if those stories are true or not? But they said that those are that's where they made all the steel for like the Empire State Building and other things. But then I started thinking, you know, I'm not for sure that the Empire State Building was built in our time, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that's something I wanted to bring up today too, because a lot of Shaver is sort of Art Deco too.
Yeah.
It's like kind of this combination of like steampunk and Art Deco. And that another thing with the David Wilcock thing it was really tying in, because he was saying in these old buildings, especially in the cities, right? Because that's where the old world was were these cities. That's why everything gravitated to the cities, because I think they're already there, right? You know?
Yeah.
And especially New York. And we'll get into it because it's what's under New York. But he was saying, and I'm not even sure if it was him. It was actually somebody else, like David Icke was actually saying it, I think, early on, that you could go into one of these older buildings, these Art Deco buildings, and go into an elevator, and by accident you could push the wrong buttons and go down past the floors and keep going. And that's how they do it. They go into these elevators and they have like a special pass, or they have it's probably more high tech now, but there were stories of people accidentally going into the underground, like on elevators. And then in the Richard Shaver stories, one of the very first earliest stories in the timeline of the whole thing, because the timeline's all messed up. You have to kind of read through the timeline, but on the older ones, like, and who knows how long ago, this is like supposedly Atlantis or Mu, but they would go to the surface and come back down using elevators, and it was part of the buildings. And so, I just wonder. But,
So do you think they're possibly still operational now, that people are traveling between two, if you like, two worlds?
Absolutely. I 100% believe that. Like it's even out here, like the place called Ridgecrest, which is out in the middle of nowhere. It's right where the 390, people from California will know, right where the 395 and the 14 meet, and then it turns into the 395, and that's where you go up to the Long Valley Caldera and Mammoth, like we were talking about last time. But right at that crux is a place called Ridgecrest, and so the story, and it's just above a couple of really big military bases, and just below another one, like China Lake. In fact, it's right next to China Lake, and China Lake is the home of chemtrails. You can almost track the planes going there, because they're all like going in this one direction, and it's up there. And what's that guy? Do you remember the guy that he was a lieutenant, or and he was a Satanist, and
No, I don't.
That'll have to come back to me. But he was based out there, and he was doing a lot of MK Ultra stuff on people, and it was all kind of coming out of China base. But that's not the only place. It was below it is a couple other Air Force bases and stuff, and they're definitely doing stuff out there. And there's definitely things out there, because out in the military. But Ridgecrest, the story was they had a jump gate there, so it all looks like super benign. There's probably only like 1,000 people in the town, if that, right? It only actually exists because it's in between two sort of highways up there.
Yeah.
And anyway, there was a jump gate out there, and like Americans are really good at doing this. They make things look really mundane. like the buildings just all like maybe it's even an old hangar or something, and it looks all super run down. And then you go inside, and it's just super all high tech and decked out, and that's where they're going into the underground. They have all these spots all over the world. I'm sure by you even too as well. Where they can get into the underground maglev. You've heard of that, the magnetic levitation range, and you can get anywhere in the world, 20 minutes, stuff like that. And I believe there's a war going on, in the underground right now as we speak.
Do you? So who
absolutely. Yeah.
What's your gut tell you about that then? I mean, who do you think is fighting who?
Gosh, well, it's like Elizabeth Hancock was talking about the white hats and stuff, and that's what we've been led to believe. I've gotten a little black pilled on the whole thing because it's taken forever, but we've definitely seen signs. Like we've had the firestorms out here, like the Thomas fire and the Paradise fire and a bunch of other weird stuff, and it's all like really suspicious activity, like dew. I've lived here for years, and I've never experienced what we experienced. The day that are basically we have a little mountain range. It's not a mountain range; it's like a little hill, but about 1,000 feet high, 2,000 feet high. The whole thing burned within like a couple hours. Never seen anything like that. It started off 2 cities over, burned all the way through here, and then burned up to Santa Barbara, which is another 40-minute drive north.
So what were they doing there then? That's specific, isn't it? That's a targeted.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a couple things. If you take so like we were talking about, these guys want to tell everybody what they know. It's like a mafia guy who really wants to be legit, right? He wants to turn his mafia money into legit money, and now he's like the mayor of, whatever, Toronto or something. Yeah. I don't know. And so if you take the map of the overland train, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but they're trying to do this overland train a lot like the maglev underground, but they want to do overland, and they want that everywhere, like up through the Bering Strait into Russia. So and they want to do it everywhere. But if those maps exist, like the potentiality of what they want to do, those maps exist, and if you overlay it, it literally is right where the Paradise fire was and right where our fire was. It's supposed to be tracking over these hills and stuff. So there's some thought that they're just burning out these places for a land grab because this is where they want to make everything. Yeah. Like, and they did it too. They were like, you can't go back in there and build now because it's just too destroyed and there's too many chemicals and this and that. They're really like, they're really worried about your health, guy. Meanwhile, they're just flying like aluminum and barium over your head all day. But so there's a bit of that. Okay, and there's more proof there's war in the underground too, because during these fires also, like a couple of cities down, like what we call the valley, there was fire coming up out of the underground, out of the venting, the street venting and stuff. That never happens out here. And where was this fire? And people were videoing it, and it was like just billowing out of the water. What do they call them? For drains. The drains, and the manholes and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was like fire here, fire there, and so clearly this is all connected. And it's then there was also what I call the Battle of the Getty Museum. There seems to have been at least 2 battles at the Getty Museum across the 405, which is again getting us back to. I came a little prepared today. Getting us back to David McGowan talking about Laurel Canyon. So I highly recommend people reading that because he talks about some things that aren't terribly well known about this area. And so sometimes I like to go down to Topanga area and go try and drive through there and just see if I can see. They've changed it all now, but it all started at the top of Laurel Canyon. It was like, I don't want to use the word Nazi, but it was a German encampment.
Yeah.
And they had everything there. They had lookout posts. Like this is like in the 1920s, 1910.
Really?
Yeah. And before even Hollywood had started, and it was all underground, right?
Yeah.
And they had fruit trees. He describes the whole thing. Because basically you could have lived on this compound indefinitely because you had all the means to do it with, and it was like a fortress. It had been kind of built up. It was up high. There wasn't much building going on back then, but like, who did all this stuff? Like, how did they get it underground? But yet it was. And I'll tell you why. We can prove that because it later ended up turning into a studio, an underground studio during the wars. And then that's when they started pumping out war propaganda through this particular studio that it turned into. And then eventually that all kind of moved more into Hollywood. But good.
What's the backstory to the place then? So you're saying it was a German, literally a German town,
a German compound.
Yeah, and there are buildings there, structures. What's the backstory to that? How did the Germans arrive there? And
they just started coming. The Germans were circumnavigating. I hate to use that word, but the globe.
Yeah,
they were circumnavigating the globe. They really were. I mean, they were going around our known lands. The Abernabi. I don't know how far back. I suspect the Germans are very important in this entire story somehow. What does German actually mean? The genuines, right? Isn't that what Germans mean? And so, and they definitely knew. And I think that at some point we should have a nice discussion about World War II, because we really don't know what happened in World War II, and I think it's important. Don't you think?
Well, that's why I wrote about what happened in my first book. I wrote about the cause of the First World War and really what it was all about. And the Second World War, if you look at what happened here in England, that most of the bombing during the Blitz took place in the East End of London, and it was a particular area of land that the parasites wanted to redevelop.
There it is again.
Yeah, the residents wouldn't budge. Nobody wanted to move or sell if they owned the property. They wouldn't go. It got completely annihilated. And if you think about it, if you are coming over to kill people, reduce morale, or have a significant impact, then you would have targeted Westminster, St. Paul's, Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, Whitehall. None of this stuff got touched. There was one stray bomb that I think went near Buckingham Palace, but the only area that's bombed is the area of land they want to redevelop. And a lot of people believe that it was our own pilots were dropping the bombs.
That's so mad. That's exactly what I was thinking about, almost yesterday. How do we really even know what was going on in the world? Everybody's got to go down into the bunker and go hide, and no one could be out. I didn't live back then, so we don't really know. But the fact that you think that, or that there is some suspicion that it was our own people that were bombing us just makes so much crazy sense.
Yeah,
it really does, and it's getting clearer and clearer that every war seems to have been some level of fabrication and destroying the old world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at the invasion of Iraq. The first thing they do is bomb the site where they believe they found the remains of Gilgamesh, a tomb of Gilgamesh.
Wow. You've seen those videos, right?
Yeah. And I've spoken. I've spoken to somebody who was in the US military that was security attached to actually protecting that specific site. They were on patrol there. As soon as it was found, they were dispatched there, and they were patrolling that area, and then they literally flattened it. And it was just a few weeks before that a German archaeologist reported on the BBC that he had found what he believed to be the tomb of Gilgamesh, and it was sort of 15-foot red-haired giant in there.
With weird skin too. He had almost like purple skin.
Yeah, really strange. That sort of what you instantly think stasis. Of. Pardon?
Yeah, I was laying in stasis, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I sometimes think of Avatar, the Anunnaki, the expression blue blood. I think that comes from somewhere.
Corey Good, David Wilcock talk about the the blue aliens that are from the Law of One, sort of feathered,
Yeah.
and then they're all blue as well, and
Yeah.
they're big. Yeah, I mean, it's coming from somewhere, isn't it? I mean, it's not. Look at the gods of the Vishnu;
Yes.
they're all blue.
Yeah.
And I heard a thing where I just forget. I think it's like colloidal silver or something. And if you take too much of it, then your skin will turn blue.
Yes. Yeah. There
And
is that. Yeah. The
and it's
blue.
actually healthier for you. They say you're supposed to be blue. I don't know. I don't know what this means.
Yeah. So we don't have the
That's
same.
weird.
I think it's to do with radiation from the sun.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder: is there actually a war going on underneath there, or are they just going down there and collecting everything and destroying it as they go as well? I mean, you have to consider that.
Yeah. Of course.
But I like to think that there is a war going on, and I do think that there is. There does seem to be a battle of the hidden world right now on control of it, and I just wonder. I wonder how that all ties into the millennial reign, because I'm so keyed into this millennial reign thing, because the architecture is the millennial reign architecture is completely different, I think,
Yes, it is.
and it seems like something has spurned it, and it also makes it very real. Like, it makes this whole millennial reign thing very, very real, and like this, and I don't know if that's the right name, Jesus, but him and his saints, they when you go and look into this information, it's just becomes very, very real. And it makes sense why they just hate these buildings so much, and it's because it's not just hiding it, is it? There's almost like a deep-seated hatred that they have. We're going to kill millions just so we can destroy these buildings. It's going to serve multi-layers, like they always do that.
Yeah.
Everything they do is always kind of multi-layered, and for many reasons or whatever, so it just makes me wonder. But yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating. But a lot of stuff's been happening out here on the West Coast, which I used to think it was culturalist out here, but studying the millennial reign, I hate to keep harping about that, but she from Leaving Babylon, Madeline, she's really studying this entire West coastline, and there's just so much damage. And now that, like you said, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So we have like the mud fossils, and we have like mountains that look like ancient something.
Yeah.
They don't look. They look like they could have been something. And then you get into the whole meltology thing, and you start looking around, and you go, well, yeah, I didn't know bricks could melt. Did you know that? I mean, that's the first stepping off point in the meltology thing, is you have to understand that, hey, this stuff can melt, and it was also dielectric. So there was an electrical property to these bricks, meaning that there was a reason why they're using the bricks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They can store energy. It's the same.
Store energy. Yeah.
It's the same chemical process that creates rust with red brick, but specific red brick. And so if you look at the world's palace, the world's fairs and crystal palaces,
right?
To melt steel and glass. I mean, we're talking. Thousands of degrees, 4,000 degrees. Right. This all points to direct energy weapons in my mind.
When you talk about like the World's Fair, like Chicago, San Francisco, all of them. I mean, I think there was some like in like St. Paul and stuff like that. St. Paul, right? So those to me really look like millennial reign style buildings. They're so ornate and beautiful for no reason. We were talking about this last time. I'm in the building trade, architectural major, blah blah blah. But when I look at that with my studied eyes, I really like something in all of us. Something really clicks. Like, it's a longing for a place we never even knew existed yet. We suspected it, because why would these cities, as far back as you go on these old maps, they're there. The city, Chicago, right? Chicago, New York, Washington D.C., San Francisco, Salt Lake City. and some of the other really great cities of the East. That they're all there. And anyway, yeah. So Shaver told us that all these cities are really what's left of the ancient civilization. Mu,
So,
Atlantis.
so he thinks. So for him, there's no Tartaria in his work.
No, I
He's
didn't.
talking
No,
more about Atlantis and
yeah, Tartaria is like a new, like that's the first I've ever heard of it was probably 10 or 15, 10 years ago, maybe.
yeah,
When I started tripping on the buildings, I started, I just come back from England and I was like, I kind of guy, sometimes I wonder if there isn't sort of like a group of people or beings, or maybe it's AI, maybe it's all three, that are sort of like slowly feeding this information,
mm,
like some unseen force, because I feel so guided sometimes, and I'm like, Tartaria was one of those things where it was just like rolling around in my head so much, you know, these buildings, what are these buildings? And all of a sudden, Tartaria started coming more into focus. That word
yeah,
started to pop up like in my news feed or my searches, and then you have to go and start delving into it, and then it just opens up this whole world that and here we are. So, but no, his what he talks about is that everything is connected underground, like they're
yeah,
all connected by like all the maglev tunnels that they probably rebored them and stuff, but there's like they've probably reopened up a lot of these tunnels and stuff, and they're like
yeah.
already there, and they just stuck a train in it. And then you got to figure too, some of these tunnels are probably huge because the beings were also huge. They must have had to they needed to get around and stuff. Like if you look at some of these old buildings, right, that are clearly like too big for humans our size to made, like we just wouldn't build like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I
they will
agree.
facade it, right? They'll start putting facades in there, and so you'll see like, well, we know about the mud flood windows, right? That are like below level. Why did that happen? Doesn't make any sense. But if you start looking at like even mansions, like mansions are all kind of part of this whole world, this hidden world. But if you look at mansions, like there'll be kind of a huge front door, not terribly huge, but like larger than normal, and then above it is a big window, right? A big window above that, and that becomes quite common for people to when they're building like that, especially like sort of White House style.
Yeah,
It has that. But if you take out that center, that the header over the door, I think what they just kind of built into it, because that is really just
yeah.
one giant door is what I believe.
Sometimes I look at them and at the doors, and normally there's steps up to them, which you wouldn't do because it makes
Yeah,
getting in and out and moving furniture and so on in and out a lot more
right. That's
difficult.
true.
And I
Yeah,
look at these front doors, and I think the ones that are sort of more suitable for our stature, and I think if they just repurposed a window, or was there a window there with a balcony, and they've taken that out and replaced it with a door, and the original front door is a couple of at least 2 stories below.
I mean it's everywhere. It's even in my city. Like I spent like 6 months in Rochester, which was actually an amazing place. But again, New York, and like they had mansions out there. We go into the mansions for whatever reason, and for a party, or for a dinner party or something, and they would go, yeah, we have secret. All the houses had like little secret passages and stuff.
Yeah,
Like, who's building like this? I thought that was fascinating. Also, the old bookstores. I like to go into old bookstores
mm,
and just go into the occult section and just see
mm.
like used books
Yeah.
and
Oh,
see
absolutely.
you know what I mean? I remember going into one. I found one and I kept going over there, and I've delved in magic a little bit. Not I don't practice magic or anything, but as a younger person, I was kind of fascinated with it.
Yeah,
And I remember opening up this really old book on magic, and everything got really cold. Like something was going on. I could feel energy getting pulled from me. And I was like, oh, nope, put that back.
yeah.
But another time I was in Vancouver and I found it. It almost like flew off the shelf to me. This book, something about UFOs, and I was really into. I really couldn't wait to start reading this book. I forget what it was on, but it was on UFOs. And then we went into one of the cafes, and I forgot it. I left it on the seat, and so it came and went. But books are so fascinating. They really, it's where information was stored before the advent of the internet and all that. But
it's a dying art, though, reading. I hear people all the time say to me, "Oh, I listen to audiobooks, or I've read your book or another book on Kindle," and I remind people that that reading and holding a real physical book is becoming a dying art form, and if they turn everything off at some point and everything you have is online, then you're left with nothing. And I think we need to have vinyl. We need to print our old photographs off and put them in albums again like we used to, because now we just scroll through our phone and show people some images, and you scroll back and you forgot that you've taken a lot of these pictures.
That's right.
And they'll turn everything off. And Kindle, Kindle's a very clever word for an electronic book, because kindling is what you use to start a fire, and we know about the burning of the books. And with Kindle, I wonder, is what you publish on Kindle the same as what's being put out a year later? Do they go in there and alter some of the information? Unless you're constantly going on and rereading things, you're not going to know if what is available today on Kindle is what was printed, or published, a year ago, 10 years ago. And I think there's a clue in that.
I absolutely agree. And I'm sure they're doing it with books too. But that is something to be concerned about, and it also kind of gets into that whole Mandela effect. When we started getting keyed into that, I was like, it really just felt like they were going back through the internet and sort of whitewashing or changing things around.
Yeah.
Now I don't, not so sure about that, but I do suspect that there is, that is happening as well as the timeline jumps and stuff. Timeline jumps, I think, are like so seamless that we just don't even know. We wouldn't know. We could literally walk out the door and be in a different timeline. We just won't know. I've got this great video of this guy, classic Mandela effect. I know this is getting sideways, guy. Sorry, but the Berenstein Bears. He had a book, the Berenstein Bears.
Yeah,
I remember it was never. It was the Berenstein Bears, right? Because I could never pronounce it as a kid. I was like, this is a kid's book, but they couldn't make this easier to read. I could never. But now they're like, oh, it's the Berenstain Bears, right? And this
video where he goes from one room to another,
one room to the other.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if we should believe that or not, but he seemed like he was pretty. He didn't seem like he was pulling anybody's leg. He was like literally trying to show us. But even if it's not, I do think it is like that. That's possible. When you're walking into a temporal zone or in or out of one, I do think it would be like that. And I do think that the military has that capability now.
Do you sometimes think that time's sped up? That now time is going faster than it was before? Because
it does seem that way.
It's like a reset happened in 2020. I mean, they installed all of these 5G masts everywhere, and we were all told to stay indoors. And I wonder if they made a few adjustments during that period of time, because a lot of people were sat around at home. The people that were out of work weren't exactly bumping into their friends and many other people. It would be the perfect time to do it. And since then, it just seems like time's going so quickly. And I know that time is relative. I understand that. But for me, when Einstein said time's relative, I think by that he meant that it's relative dependent upon what you're doing. Time flies when you're having fun. Bless you. Right. And I think that for me, it seems like I don't have as many hours in the day as I used to have, or they're going faster than they used to.
It does seem like time is going very, very fast. Also, too, since 2016, everybody's been so keyed in with this whole, or 2017, with this whole Trump and Q movement, and like the white hats are taking over the world, and now we're all like black pilled because like, oh, this is taking forever, nothing's happening, and now it's confusing. like I'm a geopolitical major. I think if anything, that's sort of I'm like paranormal and geopolitics, but I just put it down. I can't. It's just too much. It's confusing. I don't know what's going on. All I can do is just sort of keep my eye on it and just keep posting different things that I want to. Most of the stuff I post for myself.
Yeah.
Because, and honestly, I don't think I have that many followers, which I don't care. But I post a lot of things for myself, so I can come back and like re-reference it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, time moving fast. We were so expectant on things changing that we seem to have sped up time. Now I don't know if that's part of the component or what. I'll tell you a story. I was born into the Jehovah's Witness cult. I never told you this.
No.
Yeah. Did I tell you this? Oh
no, you didn't.
Yeah, and it took me years to get out of it. I finally found out it was a Freemasonic religion. So sorry, but that's what actually helped me get out of it, because the founders of it they all have like pyramids and like it's all like really Illuminati sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's also what I also learned to publicly speak like this and talk to people about awkward subjects, and so I just kind of prepared the way for me. But and they go underground too, the Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So in New York, they take all our money, the contributions that the society has, and they own like 4 or 5 blocks of somewhere in, I don't know if it's Manhattan or it's like across but they immediately started burning. So they own all these buildings, and then they burrowed down too. So you can go from like one city block to the other one underground, never come to the surface. So I forgot why I was telling you why I was a Jehovah's Witness.
I don't know, but there's a common theme there, isn't there?
They're
obsessed with the underground. So this is repurposing networks, tunnels that were already there, in my mind. But how old are they? I mean,
it can be proven. It can be proven because there's truck drivers that can drive for miles in the underground, right? And there's not just one truck driver. These guys are like, it's a full-on hub. You wonder where all your money's going. All the money, all your tax money and stuff, it's all going into the underground. How my saying is always everything leads to the underground, and it's true. If you almost 90% of movies will end up in the underground. Almost 90% of Dean Koontz's fictional stories will lead into the underground.
Yeah.
It's and Richard Shaver's, the whole thing's on the underground stuff. And
I found what you said about Richard Shaver really interesting, because you said that he started, he had an experience, and then he was being communicated with by other beings or an entity of sorts. Well, that's exactly what Nikola Tesla said, that he was receiving all the information and he believed he was speaking to the Venetians. And I find that very, very similar, that kind of backstory. That
it's we're receivers, aren't we? The human body. And this gets back into the row. Remember we talked about the row?
Yeah.
Where they were rowing the information to you. And then now we have the thing called like voice of God technology. You ever heard of this?
No.
Oh, so voice of God technology is like the intelligentsia crowd has this. And so they'll gang stalk people, and they always use this technology for nefarious purposes, when it wasn't designed to be like that. But yes, of course, technology is technology. You can use it for good or for bad. Voice of God technology, they can literally like send a carrier wave into your head and send in information. So one of the very first things that I read a long time ago when I started getting into the conspiracy world, it was like, hey, do you sit down and start organizing your thoughts, like so that you understand where thoughts are coming from? Like, did you have that thought? Was that your own thought? And I was like, oh, what a bunch of woo-woo crap that is. But now it's a good idea. It's a good practice anyways. I can tell between my body telling me something or my my spiritual body telling me something, or my higher self, or even source telling me, or some other. I can kind of differentiate between all those different thoughts now. So I've had a lot of practice doing it, but yeah. So anyway, voice of God technology, they can send in a complete thought, anything.
Who's they?
Well, in this particular instance, it would probably be some sort of facet of the CIA, maybe the FBI working under the CIA. You know, when they get outside of America, then who knows? You know, whatever. You know, one intelligence agencies, all intelligence agencies. They're all.
Yeah, I agree. They're all
I'm sure
connected.
obviously it's a ladder, sort of pyramidal, but you know, there's just groups of. You've heard of gang stalking?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know whether or not to believe that either or not, but I've seen a few videos. In fact, one right out of Hollywood, this guy was being heavily gang stalked, and he goes, "There's the guy right there." So he could film him, and so he ran down the stairs at this guy, and the guy was trying to hide his face. And he didn't know, he got caught, and he didn't know where to go, and the guy is filming him and confronts him, and the guy knew his name. And he said, I forget his name, Mike or Mark, whatever. He goes, you know, Mark, you're not supposed to be doing this. I mean, that's pretty freaky, isn't it?
Wow.
I mean, yeah, and it's not just here. I guess it happens a lot, like in Singapore and Australia, and I assume, you know, England, and yeah, everywhere, I'm sure. Targeted individuals. Sorry.
My youngest son, he went to Portugal during the first lockdown that we had here, and he went on a retreat with some shaman to do an ayahuasca ceremony, and he wanted to try it. He was at a bit of a crossroads. He was given the opportunity to he'd started the process of becoming a pilot in the RAF.
Oh, cool.
And he wasn't sure. He didn't know if he wanted to do that. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, so he thought the ayahuasca ceremony might give him some answers to some of life's mysteries.
I would agree.
And you know, I won't sort of go into detail, but one thing he did say that was really interesting was afterwards, for a long time afterwards, he would be because he works for Barclays, the bank, and their head office obviously in London. And sometimes he would go to London and he would be walking along a street somewhere, and he would notice someone that didn't look quite right. You know, and I don't mean that they were disfigured. I mean that they didn't look quite like us. And he would catch their eye, and they would see that he was looking at them, and they would turn away. And he said on several occasions that when he'd seen people like this, he knew that they weren't human. He knew they knew that he knew that, and they would hide. They would disappear. They would go into a building. They'd turn around. They'd walk the other way, and he started to see it all the time. And it's worn off now. But now he can just sense it. He can sense it if there's somebody in a room or near him that isn't quite what we believe them to be. He has this feeling, but he could see it immediately after he'd sort of, I suppose, unblocked his pineal gland and got everything back up and running again.
I definitely feel sometimes like I'm being handled as well. Like it's just a weird feeling. Like I just being, and then I made a couple of changes to my life, and then my life totally turned around, like for the better. And but I still feel like there's some guiding force. Yeah, I just no real way to explain it, but I it's just, yeah, I don't know. And the whole time thing's interesting, like because time is a construct.
Yeah,
you know?
To help the trains run on. Yeah, so we know what time when to be on a platform to get a train, I think, is initially.
It's another level of control too. But I've come to this conclusion that time, there is a component, like the fourth dimension is supposed to be time, right? That the fourth arc of it is supposed to be time. I think it's the if there is such a thing, molecules. It's the spin ratio of molecules, so that determines time. like how we live, how fast things are going. And it also determines how solid something is too, because it's the relationship of how close together these electromagnetic particles are to each other and how they'll form. So it's the spin rate and then the spacing of these molecules that determines like how dense an object is, or if it, how it exists in this particular dimension. Yeah. See, like, okay, so we were talking about Nydia, the blind girlfriend of Richard Shaver, who came to spring him from the prison or the jail. Yeah. Like, was she in another dimension? Because he never talks about other dimensions. To him, it was all like a physical reality that was going on. But but he doesn't deny that it could be. He just says that's not how I experienced it. So my thought on that is different dimensionalities. We can, again, like we walk into a temporal zone, we may or may not ever know. And if you were in another dimension, it would seem like those people are physical. So you could be in a different dimension. I think we tend to think of being in a different dimension like we're just going to be like ghosts or something.
Yeah.
And maybe it is like that to some level. But I also think that you could walk into a different dimension, which really would be a construct of time. Like it could be a temporal zone, and you're just basically in a physical reality. It'd be like being in a dream. It's very physical when you're in the dream. Of course, then you come out of it and you go back into waking mode. And they always say that the dream world or the spirit world is the real world, and we're in the fabricated world, right?
Yeah.
And so the Matrix. Oh, I have to give a shout out to my friend JoJo. And she was the one that said, I told her, I forgot last time, she got mad at me. Anyway, I forgot my thought there. Anyways, sorry, across the pond.
That's all right. So with the Richard Shaver books,
yeah,
obviously they're, as we know from the covers, they're illustrated.
They are.
Are we seeing the Greco-Roman style buildings in there that we would associate with Tartaria?
Yeah, but what's fascinating is it's more like Art Deco stuff. So it's really the Art Deco looking stuff. And we've seen the old photos of them all being lit up and stuff before there was electricity and things like that. So yeah, I mean, how old are these buildings?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if back in Atlantis' time, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I think some of those buildings existed even back then. And how long ago was Atlantis? I don't know if that's true or not, but it sure does.
I'm with you.
I mean, I don't know what's happening here. And Elizabeth Hancock brought up something where, like, are there different dimensions existing within the same space right now? Like,
yeah,
that was a strange one. Where, like, God, this is hard to talk about because I don't even know how to explain it. But like, as one thing is forming, another thing is falling apart. But it's all like part of this dimensionality that's you could still like just maybe walk through a door and it's exactly how it was a million years ago or something. I don't know. Getting back to Ridgecrest though, the jump gate and stuff up there and the passageways into the underground. Now, Terry Carter. This is going to get back to the prospectors. There's a mountain up there called Black Mountain, and then there's another section across 14 called the Red Rocks, again. And there's dinosaur stuff in there. So we already know that there's something's going on inside there. It's very, very fascinating, and it's all right. So this prospector, young guy at the time, he kept going up there with these guys from work, and this is totally separate. Like, he has no affiliation to me. This is just something I started listening to, and then I tried to get into contact. I've tried to find the video again. It's hard to find because Terry doesn't organize his videos that well. Sorry, Terry. So it's a little bit, and I can't remember this gentleman's name, but he's one of the best, one of the greatest storytellers that I've heard. Anyway, so he used to go up to this mountain, this Black Mountain, to go look for. He said, in fact, the largest nugget of gold in North America was found just laying at the base of Black Mountain, right? So he started going up there and like trying to find stuff, and he'd have a big backpack on. He'd take, so once in a while, I said at first he didn't take a gun. This is like in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
Right after the Richard Shaver stuff. And so he started going up there, and it's an incredible tale this guy weaves. But at one point, somebody shot him. And like, he wasn't doing it. He wasn't on it. This is nobody's property or anything. It was just two guys showed up and they shot him, and it knocked him off this ledge. And now he's like in a running gunfight, which he didn't bring a gun that time. But he said subsequently every other time he brought a rifle. Now imagine there's nothing going on. This is the 50s. There's nothing up there, but except those military bases. Who these guys were, he never found out, obviously. But they did shoot him, and then when it knocked him completely off this canyon wall, and he was a little injured, right? And now he's frightened for his life, obviously. Yeah. And he goes running. He realized he'd been shot because he somehow gotten into his backpack, and one of his cans had saved him, like one of his food cans. So it like gone in the can, and somehow it saved him. It didn't enter into his body. So he's now basically hiding and trying to get out of this canyon, trying to get back to his car, which is like miles away. I've driven up there. I've seen everywhere he's talked about, right? And so he goes, I thought I was going to die. And all of a sudden an orb appeared, right? And this is 1950s. Nobody's talking about orbs or anything. No. This is a firsthand experience that he only talked about on Terry Carter's show. And this orb shows up, and he would get closer to it. It would move away. It would come to him. And so he basically figured out it was trying to communicate to him, and it got him back to his car. And he was able to get out of there. Then years and years later, him and James Mazia started talking, and he was basically like, this gentleman that's telling the story said that, because I believe it's Atlantis, and underneath Black Mountain is a part of it, or an underground city, and the equipment is still working after all these years, and that orb was part of the equipment, because it was like it's like a consciousness that's keeping track of the facility or whatever that was there. But it wasn't the only thing. So another time they went up there, him and his friends, and they're up on the mountaintop now, on the top of Black Mountain, a few thousand feet high, not very high, a few thousand feet, and they found these giant stone chairs facing each other, and I think there was a little table, but it was much larger than they were, and he's a pretty big guy. And he goes, I made the mistake of sitting down in one of the chairs. Right. Instantly, he was in another world, and there was another giant sitting in the other chair trying to communicate to him, but he couldn't understand what he was saying. And they were just as shocked as he was. And he's looking around, can't see his friends. It's a completely different world. This is what clued him in on the other side at the Red Rocks. Yeah. And I'll get into that in a second briefly. But anyway, he finally was able to like roll off the chair. Maybe I don't know what was going on there. He rolled off the chair, and he was back in his own time dimension. And his friends had been looking for him for like 5-10 minutes. And then they go, you just completely popped out of existence. Oh, wow. And they were looking for him. Anyway, and then so because of that, then he started investigating the other side. And he goes, it's a huge facade that is now like an ancient like mural or something. And at certain times of the year, the sun would come through, and it would light up this entire thing. And it was like it was like what he called it, like the snake of fire or something. And there was some other, it was like a huge bas relief. I'm talking huge, like 500, 1,000 feet high. It's still there. Like it's all still there. And there's some other stuff he talked about. I mean, it was just, these are the kind of, I mean, you would never think that would key into something that we're talking about, but you could see how all these conspiracies or all these stories are all interrelated, and I feel like that I've taken that. I feel like that's what I'm trying to do, just like you. I'm trying to gather all this information together and put it into some sort of sensible, understanding of what's going on. Anyway,
It's
that's a long
difficult
talk.
though, isn't it? But I'm with you. I think that I think
Unbelievably difficult.
our timeline is completely out. I think we kind of accept that now. I think most people believe that the timeline's been falsified. And what I wonder is if all of these events didn't take place when we've been told. So, if because if you look at Atlantis, the first person that actually writes something down, or the first piece of written information about Atlantis, we're talking about Plato.
Plato.
And
And he got
Straits
that
of
from
Gibraltar and
right. Plato got that from not Socrates. It was another guy that was in Kemet or Egypt, and so it was handed down. Such an ass. I can't remember all these names, guy.
yeah, I can't either.
But he was actually retelling the tale of
Yeah.
what he was told. So we know it was before that. At least we know that. We also know that the pyramids are older than at least 10,000 years old, right?
Yeah.
Because there's watermark. Anyway, I didn't want to. There was water. Let me just finish that. There's vertical water markings, and they and the only time that had happened was roughly about 10,000 years ago. So they think that's how they sort of dated that. But
it's difficult, isn't it? Because I've sort of looked into this a bit as well, and I wrote about this in my first book, that if you look at carbon dating, it's fundamentally flawed because
absolutely,
it all starts from one point. So they're saying, so they're basing everything that's discovered from one pivotal moment in time. But if that time is wrong, if that first decision that this happened X number of thousand years ago, if that's out, then everything's out that's dated from that point onwards. So, carbon dating, great. I mean, we've got this amazing technology where we can date things, but it is still based upon something that was introduced by the church, So I think it's fundamentally flawed. So,
I agree.
Could it be that that Atlantis fell a lot more recently than we've been told, and you've got these two civilizations that kind of almost worked together? So it may well be that Atlantis didn't actually go completely until Tartaria went. I mean, it could be relatively recently that Atlantis, or the remains of Atlantis, went. Did they?
I completely agree. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm actually starting to think that the Bible timeline is correct, but the people in the Bible are the new people, because the Bible doesn't contradict the fact that there were people before Adam. Like, we were all conditioned to believe that Adam was like the first, and it was just one person. I think it was a group of people, right? I've told you that before. And Eve was a group of people, and like something came before Eve. They tried that didn't work. The whole Lilith thing.
Yeah.
And there was civilizations already going on before Adam. Great civilizations. We know there were giants in the Bible that talk about the sons of Anakim, and the Bible is like they've done everything they can to diminish it. There was more books than there are, and who knows how many more books. The Ethiopian Bible's quite large. It's got like the Book of Jubilees in it. Oh yeah, you've got it, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it have the Book of Jubilees in that one? It does, doesn't it, I think? Or Book of Maccabees or something?
Sometimes I think that yes, it does. Yeah, Jubilees.
It doesn't have Enoch in it.
It doesn't have Enoch, and I was really surprised. I mean, I've got that, but and it doesn't have the Book of Giants or the Book of Jesus. But if you look at the date of the Bible when it was first written, I mean, the Torah is much older. The Torah is the first version of what we now call the Bible. And then look at the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right.
That's even older.
Okay, see, that's the only dispute that I have, I think, or at least the main one that's been like circling around my brain, is that the story of Noah also mimics another story in the Sumerian lore.
Yes, it does.
I forget which one it is.
Yeah, it
Is it
does.
Gilgamesh?
No, it's oh god. Do you know
I
what
know.
I
I'm
wrote
sorry to do
about
this,
this?
dude. Uh, push pause, and we'll restart this whole thing.
Um, I wrote about it. Ah, right. Okay, the Great Flood.
Yeah,
Okay, right. I'll read you a little bit if you like.
please do, guy.
Okay, so.
What a treat this is.
um, right. I'll try and find a good place to start. So it's to do with Nibiru passing through Earth's orbit every
Right.
3,600 years and the cataclysmic event that follows. Enki had grown fond of the humans and decided he would personally spare one man and his family. His name, now this is where I'm going to struggle, was Utnapishtim.
Oh, right. Okay, that's right.
Utnapishtim,
Yeah.
better known to you and I as Noah. Enki instructed him to build a large boat on which to carry the seeds of all living creatures, including man. This story isn't from the Bible, but from the Epic of Gilgamesh, written 3,000 years earlier.
So how does that work then? You know, like, and then again, we're back to the Anunnaki. So, and then that means, this is just me spitballing now, but that also means like God, you know, like all this stuff is like Jesus is God, and I was never brought up that way, the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I'm happy to explore it, and it's just
none of that's true either. Like, you know, they really have fabricated so much. I mean, like,
is this just all Anunnaki? I wonder.
I certainly believe so. When you look at Genesis and this is my mum's Bible from when she was a little kid, and I've got it. It was given to her in 1953, but she lent it to my cousin who died a couple of years ago, and he then took it to school. So it's kind of got a bit of sentimental. I mean, that's my mum's maiden name.
Oh yeah, Ann Newman.
Yeah.
What's the ER mean? What on there? Or ER? Is that ER or is that?
Oh, Elizabeth Regina. So that was the pretend Queen Elizabeth II that we had, that many people believe had a right to sit on a throne.
That's all another can of worms, isn't it?
And God said, "Let us make man in our image."
Yeah. Now, that's fascinating because I think there are good genes out there. I mean, it's physically and mathematically possible to map out beauty, right? They've done it, and babies can tell, like, you know, beautiful versus ugly. The gene. We're living in some sort of meat robot suits.
Yeah,
we're in meat suits, and the DNA and the genes are the receptors that tell how the sacred geometry is going to build us.
Yeah,
anything for that matter. And so did it seems to be like a war of, it's a DNA war.
Oh, very much so.
You know, there was all these civilizations that existed, but they weren't doing what this God wanted. You know, it's really hard to
well, it's plural. It's always in the Old Testament. It's plural. It's a group of people, you know, and then suddenly it's a lord, and they're talking about Enki. It's Enki and Enlil that they're talking about.
And they clearly have like ultra dimensional technology. And,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, and there's like the Ezekiel wheel, that's sort of mechanical even.
Yeah.
But there's also like real ethereal, like sort of, you know, the burning bush sort of thing. And I mean,
I think that was cannabis.
Okay, so this is getting back to Shaver. So
sorry,
if I may.
The burning bush. If you look at the story of the burning bush, and then you look at Jesus healing people that were blind, right. I think that follows his time in Tibet. and that he was working with cannabis, because cannabis is one of the few things, as far as I know, I'm sure there are people out there that will correct me, but as far as I know, with natural pharmacy, if you like,
Of
natural
course,
medicine, that
traditional
glaucoma can be treated with
Oh, right.
cannabis. So
Yeah.
you've got the story of the burning bush, you've got, and then you've got him healing the blind. And I think that's actually what that is about. I think that that's to do with cannabis. That
Well, I also think that because I'm half Chinese, so I'm like, like I practice my different martial arts and stuff, and you can really, I still use it even today, even though my hands all messed up, from arthritis guy. But
oh man, and you're
oh,
only a baby.
oh man, don't get me started. But the human body is a superhuman machine, and it whatever this is seems to be really important because they really want to like take control of it, and you can go the other way. So I've always thought this is really weird. Even when I was growing up, before I even heard of Atlantis, really, there seems to be two splits in the road.
Yeah.
One is mechanical technology, and that could be, you could even say that's like, define that as Atlantis, where it's an outside piece of machinery or something that is working and using the chi or the ether. And then you've got the other path, which is like, I think like the Lemurian sort of side of it, where everything is like done organically through your own body, through your own conscious and chi in your spirit, and that's how you're doing. You're living off the land, right? You're in touch with, you can talk to the animals. We can do all these things. Maybe you can walk on water. The Aborigines used to heal people just by chanting. I know of a story where the guy broke his leg and it was sticking out his leg, and they put blood on it, but this is kind of gross. They put menstrual blood on it. The Aborigines would save this menstrual blood in one of their didgeridoos, and for such a time, and they
I guess it's got stem cells in it.
I totally, and then they chanted, and they described it to the Westerner that was with. It was a doctor. It was a American doctor that was out there with them, and she spent a year. It's a funny story because she thought she was going there for an award, and then they just went walking off into the bush. She was like, a year later, she came back. She lost all her provisions, and but it was the whole story of how the Aborigines don't need anything, and they would completely just live completely off the land. Anyway, so the guy breaks his leg and stick it out, she said she literally saw the bone going back into his leg, and by the next morning he was hobbling around and he was fine. What?
That's incredible.
The human body is massive potential. But anyway, getting back to the Atlantis is like, we're going to build buildings, we're going to have machines, we're going to have all submarines, flying machines, all these different things. Lemuria was more like that movie with the blue people. What was the
Avatar.
It's sort of like that. And there's the story that they went to war, right? You've heard this before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So something Shaver doesn't totally talk about, but he does touch upon it. But like Nas Confunden, that book that you have, he talks about it. He talks about how the people on the outside of the ring, that's how they got there, because there was a big war.
Yeah.
And I think that it wasn't the only one. So at some point, the Lemurians, who are the earthy type people, and maybe like the islanders, I kind of sort of the Aborigines, even the Indians, sort of thing. So that was all going on perhaps over there, and then Atlantis were building up and at some point it was supposed to be a spiritual sort of civilization as well, but then they got past that and it got turned a little bit, and then they started amassing armies of war, and then that's when things started happening. And and in this story, the chiefs, I guess you call them, of Lemuria, they were so powerful, but they never used their power for anything bad, because it would be karmic retribution.
Yeah.
But when this war was levied against them with, like, you can imagine what the Atlanteans might have had, right? Warships, warplanes, submarines, the whole thing, dirigibles, I might add. And so what he had to do, the chief of the Lemurian tribe, he had to, like, he told the people, he goes, I'm going to do this to save us, but if I do this, it's going to destroy us also. But he ended up, like, basically killing their entire army in one go with his chi, like with his power.
Yeah.
But because he used that power in that way, then it started to dissolve their empire. So, and
this
maybe
is very
that's
similar to the story of Vlad the Impaler.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the same kind of thing. He gets his power from this sort of creature, this vampire type creature that lives in the cave, and he gets the power so he can kill the Turks that are invading and trying to take 1,000 children, and he knows that by doing this he will save his child and the children in his kingdom, if you like. But at the same time, he puts everybody at risk. But he does it in the end because he kind of believes he has no real option. But it's the same thing. Everything in the end is completely destroyed as a direct result of him doing something to save the very people that suffer.
Yeah, and they go into like a half-life.
Yes,
right? It's like into a world within a world.
Yeah,
time doesn't necessarily. And David Wilcock talks about that. That's where some of these beings hide. They hide just outside our temporal time dimension, I guess, and they exist like in between the worlds, is what's been described. I could see it. I think if you mar yourself enough spiritually, like if you're not doing the right things, you could slip into that time. And also it opens up portals where these beings will start messing with you, because they are energy vampires, because they live in that crease in time sort of thing. They're using us as batteries, as energy. They're feeding off.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So how much time do we have? What are we looking at?
Oh, let's have a quick look. Oh, yeah, we're kind of there, my friend.
Okay, well, can I tell a 5-minute story? Because I've been wanting to.
Of course you can.
Oh, yeah. I've been wanting to really get this one out, and it's about a shaver. So I'll tell you later about how he gets down into the underground, and we already talked about how he's the thought wire in the throne, and they put the crown on his head, and he was able to live other people's lives through their eyes. What he described was a being. There's two types of beings down there. One, they look like they're humans, called the Tero, the Tero, and that the T was for integrate energy. In other words, it was life-giving, feeding energy. So it was a positive. The other beings were Dero and Dero, and we still to this day use those prefixes, right? The De and the Ro.
Yeah.
And the Dero, he described the Dero, and just reading the books, I'd never heard of anything like this before. But he said because they would steal all the technology and then they would live in it, because there were giant like structures and machines and stuff. And the machines were still working, and it was pumping out this energy because they didn't know how to use it and they didn't know how to stop it. Also, it needed to be filtered, and they didn't know how to do that. And so, thusly, it was feeding them life, but in a twisted sort of way.
Yeah.
And it was messing up their logical thinking patterns. So in other words, they're starting to become evil, and it also distorted their growth patterns. So they would grow to immense sizes or weirdly shaped sizes, and their ears and their noses would grow because just because this energy was washing over them. They're literally like laying in these machines, and so for some reason their noses would grow, and so their noses were depicted as like really, really long. And so I took that.
Is this like a Pinocchio kind of thing?
I don't know, but this is just another like sort of Richard Shaver proof. I actually know a guy in real life. He's passed away sadly, but I know his daughter. His daughter's still alive. And Brenton saw one. He's like sort of like a hero to me. He had this he was just some dude. I think he was a truck driver or something. And one night he wakes up, and he said that there was a doorway had opened, and this creature had come out, and he was holding a device to his head, and was basically trying to kidnap him back into this doorway. And then something else happened, and out of another dimension, deep from somewhere deep way off, a huge growl like happened, and it scared the creature, and to the point where the creature sort of was just like, I'm out of here, and took off, almost like an elf in a way. So he describes the creature, and it was a Darrow, and he didn't even know. He's never read a Richard Shaver book, and I've never met anybody else in real life who's actually seen a Darrow. They're like really like rare, and he described the whole thing, the nose, everything. He drew drawings of it. He kept having to draw drawings of it. Unbelievable story. But it was years later that I read Shaver, and I was like, oh my God. So I had to go back and find him. It was incredible. It was incredible. But anyway, that's just another little proof that the hidden world of Richard Shaver there's more to it than just fictional story.
Yeah.
When people are actually seeing it. But just before we go, I wanted to point out that Richard Shaver talks about how, because we talked about the burning bush briefly, how the Darrow and even some of the Tarot of the underground would use a lot of these devices and machines to affect the surface world on purpose, to sort of trick the surface people into thinking that, oh, this is a god, or it was a ghost, or it was this, or it was that. So we have to now somehow like calculate that in as well. And how long has that been going on for? And that could that have been some of that been in the Bible times? I don't want to be, I don't want to upset people here, but we I think we do have to factor in that the underground world, the hidden underground world, is affecting the surface world. And in fact, you would say that the Darrow are actually making like train accidents happen and car accidents happen.
Oh, wow.
They would mess with the lights and stuff like that. And I went back and researched some of the stuff he was talking about, and there were actual events that did happen, and no one knew why they happened, like head-on collisions because the green light on the train tracks flipped from green to, or from red to green, and allowed another train on, and there was no real explanation of that. So anyway, that's just a bit of Richard Shaver there for you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, and I think it's worth everybody that's interested in this jumping on Amazon or wherever and starting to take a look at his work, because for me, I started looking at Jules Verne.
I can't. I love him.
Well, and I'm just thinking, this is a man who's been given information, or it's been passed down to him, or he didn't exist and they've put information out there and given a name to it. But he's talking about enigmatic. And they're all bloody doing it.
It's 100% steampunk. I mean, we call it steampunk now, but the dirigibles are in there.
Yeah.
The hollow earth, the underground.
It's all there.
That's there.
Time travel. You've got dimensions,
volcanoes, large animals, mysteriously hidden islands.
Yeah.
Lands that we don't know about. Trying to think what else. Oh yeah, it's all in there. It's so beautiful. Like we talked about steampunk last time, but remember the movie? I referenced this on our group. God, that Disney movie, Island at the Top of the World.
Yeah.
It has a dirigible in it.
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? Dirigible?
Yeah, I think
dirigible. So. Okay.
Yeah, dirigible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that they took the underground ray technology of the underground, they stuck on a dirigible, and that's how they were going across and destroying cities and stuff.
Yeah.
And before that, like I think in the millennial reign, I think they were using dirigibles to go everywhere, and they probably had like free energy, so that means you could go literally anywhere. And they and all these like the tops of like top of the Empire State Building, the churches with high towers, steeples, sort of thing. Those were all like airship docking stations, wasn't it? And if you don't need energy, you just come and go as you please. They probably had
Yeah.
thousands of them, and they could probably go to lands that we don't even know about, like up into the island at the top of the world. Which in that movie, by the way, it's island at the top of the world, but as soon as they get to the island, you clearly see it's not an island. It's going on forever, this land, and they never once mentioned that part. So
Weird, isn't it? I mean, again, it's all in plain sight, isn't it? Absolutely, in
they're
plain
dying
sight.
to tell us. They're dying to tell us.
Yeah, and I sort of I drift from it being karmic retribution that's making them do this, their fear of it, or that there are people that have infiltrated. But you see, I just think that for some of the information they put into the movies, according to Donald Marshall, Hollywood is controlled by the Illuminati. They're not going to appreciate some of the information being put out there unless they're doing it. So I
think it's the whole hue of it. It's everywhere in between, every color of that, because
yes.
Because you're going to get guys that have been given information and they're just going to rack their brains on how to try to get this information out, like William Morgan, the book at the Dorfa, and then there's others higher up that are like given the task to like shut people like that up. Unfortunately, I mean, even look at you. I mean, you have gleaned, and I don't want to use the word given information. I just mean that you've gleaned all this information, just like we all are trying to do, and it's launched and motivated you so deeply, affected you so deeply. You wrote 2 books, and I'm sure you're going to write more. And here I am on a podcast doing this. I never thought I'd be doing this, and yeah, I have a work in the project. I'm really trying to get this all down. I want to write every single paranormal story I've ever experienced. I've had a ton of them, guy. Like since I was 8 was my first one, and so I'd really like to get that all. I'm trying to do it on a video blog right now.
Yeah,
but eventually, and that's basically for me, so I can write it down later. I'm just trying to figure out how to write a book. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'd love to. I really want to put that out there, because it's like you said, when they flip the switch someday, we're just going to have our books again.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I sort of in the back of my mind, and for several years now, I've wanted to write about the true meaning behind stories that we tell our children. And I'm not going to say children's stories because they weren't ever written or intended for children.
No.
Some of the people behind them, like one of the Pied Piper of Hamelin is a good
example. Oh, that's a big one. That one's a big one.
Yeah. But if you look into the person, I've forgotten his name, that wrote Peter Pan, if you look into the backstory to him,
Barry, isn't it? Wasn't it John Barry or something?
I think so. A few years ago now, I was looking into his backstory, and it's grim.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up with his friend's children. This couple died mysteriously. He changed the will. He ends up taking custody of the kids, and all the children died. I think 2 of them committed suicide.
What was he doing? What dark things were he?
I mean, one of them wrote to him saying, "Please never write to me again. I don't ever want to hear from you again." It was really, really dark. And then there's the opposite, where you look at the story of Winnie the Pooh with Tigger and Piglet, and so on. And they're all people that the author served with in the First World War. And so there is the odd nice one, but a lot of these stories, they involve children. I mean, if you look at Peter Pan, you've got a grown man that doesn't want to grow up, that is taking children in the middle of the night from their homes, and you've got the British Navy going out there to try and get them back again. And some of the things he says, there's a kid who's a bit big, and he won't fit through a chute or a tunnel in some rocks, I think, or in a cave.
Right.
And Peter Pan says, "Don't worry, we've got ways of making sure you'll fit through that." I mean, he's referencing to chopping him up and things. It is really savage. And all of these stories do stem from something pretty unpleasant. I mean, the Pied Piper of Hamelin,
that's an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean,
delve into that, even scratch the surface on that one. They go into a rock. into
Yeah.
the underground or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's always, isn't it? They just
never to be
disappear.
seen again.
A lot of them are children disappearing.
They love stealing the children, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But
they do. They do. And I think a modern day version of showing us what exactly goes on
yeah.
is Monsters Inc. To
Oh
see
well,
the
no,
children
of
being
course,
terrified, and
of
then
course.
it wasn't the screams they're after. It's what happens to their blood when they scream.
It's the energy. It's the energy.
Yeah, the word we're not
Yeah.
allowed to say on YouTube without it being taken down.
Well, the other thing about the Monsters Inc. movie is that at the end they realize that laughter is actually a bit. So they're not going to change their ways. They're just going to use laughter instead of fear now.
Mm.
However, I feel like that might have been a true tale of the underground, like that the policies of the sort of Illuminati and the underground and all this hidden world sort of thing, the policies are changing because it's very political, like in that world. Like
Mm.
you got to abide by there's certain rules, and if you break the rules, it's gonna probably mean your life, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a very life and death in the hidden world, it seems like. So so the end of Monsters Inc. changing to they're still going to harvest your energy, but it's going to be a different kind of energy. It's going to be like a kinder, gentler now sort of Monsters Inc., you know? And I feel like, is that what we're witnessing today? It's the changing of the guard. Yeah, we're still going to have the whole apparatus is still going to be in place. It's just there's new controllers, you know, and the kind of gentler controllers. I don't know.
Isn't it? It's always the same thing, the
White
controllers. And you know, well, I don't believe we need to be controlled. I think that given the right environment and the right opportunities, and if we remove starvation and poisoning, and we allow people to have what they need without greed, then you immediately remove a lot of crime. We all know the difference between right and wrong. No one's born evil. You know, that's just not true. You know, a child is not born evil, and a dog's not born hating people and other dogs and wanting to attack.
Right.
You know, we're a product of our environment, aren't we? And if the environment's right, then we're going to be naturally good, kind, benevolent people. So do we need somebody sat above us telling us what to do? Even if they've got the best intentions, we're still reporting to someone. It's still like bloody Stockholm syndrome.
If you think about it, if beings could live 50,000, 100,000 years or whatever, we are literally like infants, even though
absolutely we die in our infancy.
Yeah, we never. Once we get to the good part of life, where we have all this knowledge, you know, and we're really, you know, kind of keening in on stuff, and we're eating the right food, you know, that's not, but now you're at the end of your life. By the time you gather all that information together, it's actually quite perfect for the parasitic controllers, because they're like, oh well, they're just, by the time they start figuring stuff out, that they're gone anyway, and they got to recycle, you know.
And I know that it's different now because it's, you know, currency is fiat and it's all electronic, so it's no longer real. They can just put as many noughts on a bank balance as they want. So
nothing's real anymore.
No, and the only reason that they would put up the cost of living and charge more and charge us more taxes is just to cause suffering. It's for no other reason than that. They don't need the money. So I think that we're kind of in this sort of trap where we certainly, until recently, you know, I'd like to hope that it will change, but you work all your life and then you get to a point where you retire, and as soon as the government is paying you a pension through the state, that seems to be when they want to take all of your savings away. And then as soon as they've done that, get rid of you in any way they can, so you no longer take anything from the system, but you spent your life putting into it.
How many people die in hospitals that don't need to die?
Absolutely. We saw that in 2020.
You can go in there healthy and they'll stick you in a bed and you can't get out because, right, like here in America, like they won't sign the waiver for you to leave, and it'll be illegal for you to leave, and you could leave and they can come arrest you for that.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Well, the hidden world, it exists. And I think today we've touched on a few subjects where we kind of did prove that, and we'll keep continuing to prove that.
Yes,
because everything leads to the underground, and all conspiracies are one conspiracy. You know?
Yeah, I think so too. It's not a rabbit hole; it's a warren.
God, yeah, that's right.
Mm.
Yeah,
And maybe all of the underground paths lead to Rome.
I want to go into the underground, but
Mm.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid. I would like
No,
a
I
tour.
want to.
I would like a tour. It would be awesome someday
Yeah,
if we were like, oh, we are white hats, and we did change everything, and everything's good
yeah,
now, and maybe even Jesus is back. That would be cool. And giants and cool giants, you know, not the ones that eat you
yeah,
and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. I think that we've been misled
yeah.
to think that
And
they're nefarious.
and they'll be like, come on down and check out the beautiful lands of the underground, because it's not all just like dim, grim, dark, and
No, I
like
don't think so.
There's stories of like Agartha where it's just beautiful. They're doing all
Yeah,
the right things. They're doing all the Reiki over
yeah. It looks like
all the food they
Atlantis.
eat and everything. Yeah, exactly.
Or the image we have of Atlantis is
Yeah.
the image that we often see
I actually think
with
that
Agartha.
Agartha might be the combination of Lemuria and Atlantis. Like all the good people from either side just said, "Hey, obviously the war was this war thing. This war thing that we invented is no good."
Mm.
You know, because Shaver talks about the fact that it wasn't the Atlanteans that wanted it. It was a group of people that, when the sun started to change, it started to warp their thinking, but it was so gradual that no one recognized it, not even the people that were getting warped, but they started wanting more and more power. And so they started slowly gathering all the power. Like, in other words, they started gathering all the machines, they ran all the security, you know, right? They started getting themselves into positions of authority, and then they gathered it all together, and then they started wiping out their own people, and then they started attacking other people. I mean, it kind of sounds a lot like the industrial military complex, you know.
Well, it sounds like you've just described the Jesuits infiltrating
Right.
everywhere, really.
Where did they learn this playbook from, right? It's always the same playbook. Yeah. Well, that'll get us into Gog and Magog next time. We'll talk
Yeah, yeah,
about that.
all for that. Yeah, I wrote about those too.
Gog
Right,
and Magog surrounding the camp of the saints. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time again, Matt. I do appreciate it. We'll have to get you back on, and we'll do that. Maybe we do Agartha next.
Okay, yeah, I'll do a quick peek around that. I just want to say I'm going to be on Elizabeth Hancock's. I'm gonna record it tomorrow with her, and thank you for introducing me to her. She's lovely.
Welcome. Yeah,
I can't believe you guys live in the same town.
Well, same county. She's an hour away from me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, what?
We've never met. Yeah,
wow.
she's literally an hour away, but we've never met. But she's only recently moved here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I've been here a while.
Are you going to go on her conference?
That was yesterday.
Did you go? Were you on it?
Yeah. So that started at 10 a.m.
Okay, I'm sorry. My weekend's been so busy. I just anyway.
Well, it's up. So it's there for good now. So a lot of people joined in while it was on, but it's obviously now it'll gain a bit more traction because not everybody could stop what they were doing to watch it, and there might be people that they're more interested in listening to than others. So it's up there now. It is 10 hours long, so people might fall through certain things that they already know about. But it went really, really well. She did a fantastic job. I mean, she was up at, I started talking to her 6 o'clock yesterday morning, and she was still going at 10 o'clock at night. She's still on YouTube Live.
Oh, wow.
So she must be
bloody work exhausted.
Yeah, she is.
I can tell that she's more of a spiritualist, and I really appreciate that.
She is, yeah. My wife's
really
like
that's
that,
where,
but
no matter what happens in our lives, like good or bad, if you can just get back to the spirit side of ourselves, we'll immediately start feeling better. You immediately start connecting with God or Source, and life just becomes a lot easier and better. So I just love seeing that. Just like you, it's what we do. It's what we do. Anyway, thank you for everything, and I want to tell you Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day to you too.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. All right. Well,
until next time.
Absolutely. Can't wait to talk to you again. Love you, mate.
Yeah, love you too.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye for now.
Okay.